Hello and welcome back to the channel and another of my interview series. Today I'm asking the question, can we do without our GP? I don't know, we've been brought up going to the doctor very regularly, have we not? And, well, when you can get in there, of course, these days, not as easy. And they give us a number of pills and they keep us healthy. That's sort of what it's all about. Or is it? I'm going to talk to Kym Murden, a herbalist. She might have a slightly different view. Hello, Kym. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Richard. Nice to see you, and thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. It's nice to. Now, just so people know, I do know Kym, and we've met many times. And in fact, you've given some lovely herbal advice and remedies to the lovely Julia, which has been going down really well. So, got a sort of vested interest, just so the audience know, I suppose, that herbs and things like that. And you've actually helped me think about this whole subject way back, really long before the pandemic, when we were going out doing walks and peering at herbs just for the fun of it, and a different approach, because like I said in the intro, many of us have just grown up thinking, well, when you're ill you go to the doctor, he gives you something, you don't really know what it is, you swallow them according to the directives, and that's it. And that's sort of how we've thought of health, but that's not really a beneficial way of looking at health, is it?
Absolutely not, I would say. And perhaps I should just quickly say that, I've grown up with a line of very feisty women on both sides of my family who have a healthy distrust for what's given them, or I should say, so I've learned that, how we feed ourselves and to then look into what we put into our bodies is a really important aspect of our well-being. But to broaden out, your question a bit more, what is health?
Mm.
It's not just the absence of disease. It's very much, what we do every day to maintain our well-being on all sorts of levels. So that can be absolutely what we eat. We do that every day. How we're engaging with the outside world, how we sleep, and all these sort of very things that have a long-term impact on us. And my dearly beloved, husband, who's now long past these mortal shores, but I mean, he was a doctor. He practiced integrated medicine, and he would say, avoid doctors actually like the plague if you can. Know a good doctor, but otherwise, know a good herbalist, know a good nutritionist, and then only really use orthodox modern medicine, which modern is a key in the word. It hasn't been with us that long. So there are some marvelous things it can do. And it's fantastic for acute emergency situations. But once we get into the more long-term chronic health problems, it can stumble with how to help us. And I think that's a lot of the people that I get to see are in that realm. Yeah, so it's much, much bigger story than just go to the doctor, where of course, if we once we do that, and I think this is something we've slipped into with the NHS, we think we go in, we see someone, and we hand over our agency. It's like, do something with me. And
Mm.
whereas someone like a herbalist or an acupuncturist or whoever who's operating from a different modality is going to really walk very much alongside people, listen to them, engage with them, and see what they can facilitate for that person's well-being, and actually take them on a bit of a learning curve sometimes to explore with them things that they can do to improve their health condition. It might be a health condition that will be lifelong, it's a chronic thing, or it might be an acute thing and they just didn't have the tools to know how to treat it. Yes, I could go on for ages about all of this minutiae of how it
See,
operates.
you mentioned in the beginning there about modern medicine, and you picked up on the word modern, and in fact, it's interesting when you say that, because I've often thought about that in terms of food, because we also have modern food, and modern farming practices as well. And there's a whole sort of what I would call an experiment of the last 80 years since the Second World War, where we've kind of looked for shortcuts here, there, and everywhere to try and better ourselves, but and moved away from these time worn traditions and customs which were much slower but a lot more holistic and wholesome, being outdoors a lot more rather than, as we all are now, a lot more indoors, sitting down as I am. And the other thing that I'm aware of, doing these interviews and things that I've been over the last few months, I'm stuck inside under artificial lights doing a lot of this stuff and then uploading. And I have in the past always been out walking and outdoors and moving about. And now that the spring is here, I want to be doing more of that because I find I can't sit still. So the modern way of life, really, I think a lot of people have embraced it because it is convenient in many ways for a number of things, but it isn't necessarily long term very good for us.
Yes, you've touched on something that I've been thinking about a lot because we probably can all be agreed we are in a very strange, the pinnacle of very strange times. We've got very technocratic, very materialistic about how the human society's been corralled, shall we say, and how our health and our bodies are being thought of. And not that we need to put a rose-tinted spectacles and it was always better in the, lovely old days, but that engagement with our well-being, with growing our own food, or that understanding that within the home there's so much that we can do health-wise. And perhaps, not that I want to digress into really big stories, but if you dismantle the family structure and you haven't got principally the mother in the home feeding the children, showing them how to cook, explaining to them that when they get, I don't know, a cough or a cold, that they can use maybe this onion, or all that handed down knowledge. If we lose that, then we are in a very disempowered space. And I think what we're seeing with what's happened, particularly over the last few years, that ramping up of having to feel fearful about your body, not understanding that it's this amazing, God-given thing, really, that will look after us very well if we, attend correctly to it, which is not just a material process. It is like, going out for a walk, but it's also like getting your sleep. And to think that we just need to take some little micro pill from the biggest industry on the planet and think it's not going to cause any, that there's never any consequence. Well, that I think is incredibly naive. Best. You can be willfully blind at the other end. And within that, I think that there's an energy where that fearfulness has been played on, and that disempowerment of people to make them real that they then think there's not much that they can do themselves, when of course there's a huge amount that we can engage with day to day without the input of any big system. So I guess also we've got testament really to the fact that over the last 80 years or so, well, more, 100 years, we've had plentiful supplies of food. I mean, that's fantastic. The modern farming production from that, it's fed a lot more people. We've had the wonders of clean water, which has done so much for human health. Everywhere that goes around the globe, the health quality goes up. So these are really excellent inputs to modern living. But we seem to then have gone into a bit of a sleepwalking phase, to then think that we then don't need to attend to things. I guess one of my thoughts is that we need to be having these conversations about health a lot earlier on. And I don't mean some school program, because I think they can get a bit ideologically muddled.
Yes.
But by that, I mean to start for ourselves, to start thinking about those processes of life and of health. And so that when something happens to our physical body, because we have a physical body and it's going to be limited at some point, whether it's from, stepping on a rusty nail, so an acute thing that was an accident, through to something that because you've been eating crisps all day long for the last 20 years, you're going to pay a price for that, and something's going to need help with at the other end. So it shouldn't be a shock to us that our physical body is going to have challenges, and some of those challenges are absolutely fine to deal with. So I think we've naively wrapped ourselves up that something will happen, the doctor will just fix me, and I don't have to think about what I've got to do within
It's
that.
like, to me, it's like having a car I mean, I'm old enough to remember my first car had a starting handle.
Yeah.
And you well, which does make me sound much older, but it was a Morris Traveller, and you had a starting handle, and you know had all these things, but you could get a Haynes manual if you needed to strip it down and do stuff, and people were encouraged to fix their car. They could take it to a garage, of course, for convenience, but they could do it. These days, you can't.
Mm.
You don't know what's under the hood anymore, or under the bonnet, if I stay English. You don't know what's under the bonnet. You don't know you've got a vague idea of how the engine works, but you can't unless you've got an expensive system, or you can plug it into a computer to start with. And it's almost as if our health has gone down that path where we've been encouraged not to think as if we are an individual unit that we can look after ourselves to a greater or lesser degree. We've believed that the food that we're eating, the mass processed food
Yeah.
in the colourful boxes that's labelled full of extra vitamins and all these extra things that we're told, oh, it's got to be healthy because it's got all of this, although it does taste incredibly sweet, and it's sort of various things that you might, and it's lots of preservatives, or it's all bright colours that
Yeah.
doesn't seem realistic, and yet we sort of believe all that, and then, as you say, we just go to the doctor, and then there's this one pill. So what should we be doing? What things should we be looking out for, or how should we approach ourselves if we're
Yes.
taking back the responsibility?
So I think even before that sort of day-to-day stuff, I
Mm,
think that understanding, just to reiterate that we have physical bodies and they will meet limitations. So whether it's in terms of, I think women, I'm not sort of generalizing, but maybe women, because of the cycles they go through and they give birth, they get more in tune overall, that there's going to be things cropping up for them.
mm.
And I think that whole sense, well, actually, then I would say that men who get very into, say, bodybuilding or something, they've got an awareness of what their limitations of the body are. So to start to have those conversations with ourselves and with those around us, that we need to not be frightened of things happening, and then to understand that there's a healing. Our bodies innately overall want us to be in a healthy state. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to be these animals that go out and do all sorts of extraordinary things in the world. So to trust that process, it will want to come back into some harmonious um, health picture. So, and within all of that, I think there's the unspoken anxiety, or the elephant in the room, or however we want to name it, that often something will arise, that's a health problem and an illness, and the mind can spin because of the anxiety to that unsaid thing, like, oh, is this the thing that's going to, kill me off and take me out of the picture? And often what I'm working with people is to open up that space to see if that's what's really going on, or what our underground fears are. So I'm not wanting to frighten you, because I know that death word, is like, the thing
Oh,
that's,
sorry,
yeah.
I've gone. I've gone.
But once we get that in perspective, however we do that in our own personal ways, whether it's our belief systems, or I would say, people who work with nature and animals, and much orientated around the natural cycles, tend to be a lot calmer.
It's interesting you say about the death thing. I mean, because if you go back in time, of course, people died and they were laid out in state in their own homes. We were much closer associated with death. We came to accept it. Children would be witness to it. People would die in old age, or in their bed, or they might have a heart attack, or whatever it is. But it wasn't so much of a shock, and then the bodies weren't sort of carted away as if it was some weird, mysterious thing. It was part of living. You knew you
Yeah.
were coming to the end.
Well, I think, the whole process,
Mm.
giving birth, through to having childhood illnesses, the fact that then lots of, you like reading old books, you'll read of these big households and farmsteads where it was like the women who would go and gather the herbs all year round and make the beers to make sure that the household and the farm hands and the animals, had their medicines on hand. They'd be tending to giving birth to the animal, the livestock, the men and the women involved in that, and the death cycle.
Yeah.
So we've. made modern medicine into this rather, although it's wall to wall, isn't it? Sort of emergency whatever and hospital whatever things on TV, which I don't watch, but anymore. Um, so it's there in your face with that all that sort of what I call tertiary trauma and entertainment.
And
Uh,
incredibly clinical as well, isn't it?
yeah, and
So
yeah, and and then putting people, putting sort of medical professions sort of into this sort of high priestess and priest role.
yes, that's right.
And I want to, I go, well, let's bring it back to a much more human conversation. I know, there's a certain, big global man who likes to wear a jumper who wants us to all, has been telling doctors that he wants to turn medicine really in, doctors into behaving like car mechanics, and that's why we're seeing the whole medical establishment moving on to Zoom. But I would suggest that there's a lot of us who still want this I mean, I know you and I are doing this online, but overall, we want that physical human engagement. And that is actually part of the healing dynamic, the therapeutic dynamic that goes on a sort of unseen level, but also on a bigger level. If we're not engaging physically in the space with ourselves, whether it's the child who's sick in the next room, or
Mm.
the doctor who's dealing with your whatever's your cancerous growth, that you can't pick up on all the vital clues of whether it's sight or smell, or how the person's behaving. So I think again, yes, so it's it's so dangerous what we're doing to ourselves to push us everything up into the mind. And so bring it back into the cycles of the life, cycles of life. So you asked me, what can we be doing? And
Mm.
so, haven't lost sight of that. But to say one of the first things is to actually understand our place within the natural rhythm of the year. So, okay, you and I are talking in England at the moment. We're coming into spring, and so as animals, we're coming out of that the
Hibernation, sort of.
hibernation, like the slowness of the wind, the pituitary gland in our head, it's all waking up to those different light levels. And so we can then utilize, we can work with that. And okay, so on the extreme end of that, people will know who've got, their like their hay fever allergies, they're starting to get the tree pollen, so they know perfectly well it's spring. um,
Yes.
but those of us who've maybe spent too much time inside getting sluggish, this is the time to go outside, engage. And on a very simple level, I just did, from my perspective as a herbalist, when I'm doing my workshops, I go, just go out and look if you can, even if you're in a city, see what's coming to life. Start to actually pay attention, to what's growing. What are the bees doing? Well, how do the leaves come out on a tree? What's in blossom today? What's that wasn't there yesterday? And that's part of just the centering and the grounding of ourselves, rather than this spinny, digital, anxious, whatever we want to label all these things,
Mm.
label it as, to orientate, so that we're orientated a lot better. Start to learn. I mean, I'm amazed these days, how many people don't know where the moon is, where the moon rises in the sky at a given time, or do they know east from west? You can go around to people's houses and you go, well, which way does your house face? And they go, I don't know. And it's
Don't
like, well,
know.
where
It's
does the
like,
sun
where
rise?
does the sun? Yeah, exactly. Which
you know
that's the
so,
east.
um but
Might be
yes.
different in the different hemisphere, by the way. I don't know. Actually, that's an
No,
interesting.
it rises in the same place.
Oh, does it rise in the same place? It sort of
Different
gets up and goes to
parts.
bed at the same. There you go. Not at the same time, of course, but at different same place.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm quite passionate in that sense that we really need, all of us have got to start having more conversations and not fretting,
Mm.
more conversations that we are a physical body. And if we are blessed enough, yes, we will live a long life, but people die at all sorts of ages and stages. And I think within medicine of all modalities, that you want I would suggest you want to be with practitioners who can sit comfortably with acknowledging that and not be spinning within their own fear space. And so that's why it's such a big conversation that we need to attend to. Otherwise, the shadow energies come into play. And I know this is like the kind of
What do you mean by shadow energies?
Well, I suppose one of the kind of the worst type of examples to give you is the sense like if you get into hospital medicine and you've got a lot of, you've got staff around you who are, there's there's a patient who actually it's patently clear it's the end of their days, and but the energy, the energy of the medical input or the checklist they've got to go through is that they've got to keep this person alive at all costs, otherwise it's seen as a failure.
Hmm.
Rather than attending to the dignity and wishes of that person, to give them the right, inputs and medicines that are making them comfortable, but not to say examples, to keep, giving them CPR or whatever, which is a really intrusive
Yeah.
procedure. It's not like you see on the TV. It really isn't. So you want to have clinicians who are, brilliant clinicians, but you also want them to be able to have those human conversations.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's what I mean by that, I guess. I mean, that's one of, rather, extreme picture of it, but it gives you very clearly the idea. Um,
On an
and
ordinary everyday basis, I mean, clearly there are some simple things for health that we can just adhere to. I mean, for example, you mentioned about water, that we've got clean water. Well, we have, but sometimes we don't quite know what's in the water these days. There might be fluoride, and when I was a kid, it was supposed to be really good, and it was in toothpaste, and it was, and then you learn later on that actually it's a byproduct of another thing, and actually they didn't know what to do with it, so they shoved it in the water, and you go, oh my God, is it really good? And apparently it's not very good. I don't really know. So I was advised to buy a water filter, which my dad used to do that sort of thing, and I used to sort of snort at him and go, oh God, Dad, for goodness sake.
whack.
Yes, you're a mad old fool. And now I'm the mad old fool filtering my water, which I just happen to have some here. And I mean, whether it's psychosomatic, I don't know, but it does certainly taste better, and it makes me feel that I'm doing something towards my health. So even if it's just on that level of trying to eat better and not go for the processed foods and drink more healthy foods and stay off the things that we all know. I mean, this is the one thing. So let me ask you this question, because most people, I would think, are aware these days that sugar isn't very good for you. Just eating tons of mass produced food isn't very good for you. Smoking isn't very good for you, and just sitting around all day doing nothing isn't very good for you. Most people would know that, and yet quite a large number of people sort of ignore all of that and assume they'll still be around in 60 years' time if they consume all those things. Why are we in the situation where people just blindly
Oh,
ignore what they actually
well,
know?
there's levels to that. I would suggest that, some of these things are highly addictive.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all of that complication. I would suggest also this thing that if we are not comfortable within our, this subconsciously we're aware that we're not comfortable somewhere emotionally, soul-wise, we're not being met. And I think probably most of your listeners would agree that we're in quite an uncomfortable part of human history at the moment. People will turn to addictive things. And I think there's a really interesting study that was done with rats and cocaine. So that there was a sort of cocaine on tap for these rats, and they would go to it. But once, and the rats were isolated, if I remember the study right. But once there was a cohort, a family group of rats, the cocaine was still there on tap, but the rats didn't go to it because they had their family grouping, they could play, they could interact, they were feeling well rounded, in their
So
life.
they didn't need
So
it as such.
didn't need it. So I think so that, yeah, on this micro level, we have to be honest with ourselves to go, well, what are the things I'm getting drawn to, and what, am I really being drawn to the next sort of can of sugary drink because I really need it and want it,
Mm.
or is it a driver? So I mean, and maybe we need to kind of then look. So I can list off. You can go and Google it. We can list off the things that are going to give us, good life. Like sleep. Clean water, like you said. So good sleep, good clean water. Reduce your carbohydrate intake. Have good clean foods. Do eat meat. I get maybe a lot of hate for that, but we've got eyes. at the front of our head, we're hunters and we're omnivores. We're designed to eat all sorts of food. Um, have food that come. I always say to people, have food as close as it's come out of nature, basically. So if you pick up a packet, like you're saying, with processed food, and it's got a whole load of ingredients that you would never have in your kitchen cupboard, then I would suggest maybe it's not not the best thing to put in your body if you don't even understand what it is.
No.
And you want to look, so, and by doing that, we're going to ensure that our gut is healthy, that hopefully we're getting the right micronutrients. Again, there can be a conversation about that our soil's depleted, and at times certain parts of our lifestyle we were going to become depleted in certain nutrients, so there's a case for supplementing. And looking at stresses and looking at the meaning. Again, I think the meaning in our life is so absolutely important. People fade away if they haven't got meaning, whether that's their social contacts or their work. So again, the health is more than just this physical incarnation of a mechanistic thing. You've got a headache, take this, you'll feel better. You're having a headache for all sorts of reasons, diet related, work related, whatever. So let's actually address that. And I think that maybe touches on a point where, with modern medicine, it's very symptomatic. If you get to see a doctor these days in a very short, you've got a very short window to talk to them, and it's like, well, I've got this. Well, have this. Get prescribed this, and goodbye.
It's the effect you're being
Yeah, yes,
prescribed for,
yeah.
but not the cause, which could be a whole long story that needs unraveling.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we have to be honest. There's some people who are either at the stage of their life, or that's it. I would call it, myself, quite a reductive way of looking at health, but that's what they get drawn into, and maybe it sorts it. But I think, as anyone who raises a family or has more complex health issues, they're looking for more. They're looking for solutions, because without your health, without feeling well, you're pretty stymied. I mean, I know, you've had your run-ins with ill health, so you know how important it is to keep what you've got where you
Absolutely, yeah.
in the best condition. Again, back with that understanding that we will gradually fade over certain things, but it's really, yeah, keep vital. So
So,
yeah.
so you're a herbalist, and so there's a whole philosophy, I guess, on herbs, of knowing what plants do what and how to extract the best bits, and don't pick that plant and just eat it, but you can actually do this with it, and suddenly it's, or if you have a tiny bit of that, it's okay, but if you have a lot of it, etc. And if you go back in time again, to times before modern medicine, a lot more people were aware of the nature around them, and certain plants would do something. They may not have become well-read herbalists or anything like that, but just that folklore that came through the family of knowing. I mean, as a kid, if you got stung with a stinging nettle, you went looking for dock leaves. I mean, that was as simple as that. You didn't go to the medicine cabinet to try and find some cream. You just find, I used to, rub these dock leaves on, and miraculously, whether it was again psychosomatic or whatever, but it worked. It got rid of the sting, and one was happy. And those sort of very simple things that people used to know. But with the next generation being brought up behind screens and not going out so much, and not experiencing the world as perhaps we did as children, it's clear that they're not going to pick up these things naturally, because their parents perhaps do not know.
Yeah.
And so it's down to then people like yourself to try and re-educate us, or indeed people come to consult you because they've got chronic problems, whatever it might be, and you're looking at an alternative way, but a natural way, a more wholesome, holistic way. So tell us a little bit about the whole process then of
Well, yes.
plants and how they help.
Yes. So and within that, to say, that it is our medicine. We are creatures of the earth, and I see it really as our as sovereign. It ties in actually with that whole conversation about sovereign beings. It is our right to go out. It's not even a right. It's just inalienable bit of knowledge to go and engage with earth medicine, and your correct in saying that we're in danger in certain areas of, especially in Western world, that this knowledge is really slipping away. So I would encourage your viewers and listeners, wherever they can go and speak to some older people, the grandparents, whatever, see what knowledge they have within there, because okay, the knowledge I might have as someone who's, professionally trained, it does not have to override what someone's learnt, it's been handed down the generations. I mean, it's just such valuable information. And I want to just pick up on that point you saying about, is it psychosomatic or not? And I just really, it's curious how we do that to sort of undermine that, or have that doubt. All medicine can be placebo,
Mm-hmm.
matter whether it's your doctor's pill or mine, my cup of tea. But it can also, there's another word, I forget it, someone really bright who's listening will remember it, but you can also have the counter effect. It's like the witch doctors, they can say, that man over there, he's going to die, and that man over there does die, even though nothing else is done to it. So
It's
we are,
very suggestive, isn't it?
yeah,
Sort
we're
of
very
suggest.
psychological creatures. And I would just say also within that understanding of health, that engagement, whether it's a parent giving something to a child or a practitioner giving something to a patient, that relationship between the two people can count, if that's an authentic, trusting relationship, that can count up to something like 80% plus of the outcome of.
Yeah, because we're very spiritual people. We may not realize that, and all of that is part of the, that whole belief system. You
Yeah,
believe, as you
yeah,
say, you believe in the person who's healing you, or you're with, or the wisdom of your granny who
yeah.
says rub that on your hand, and the medicinal thing may well also work, but
Added
it's
extra.
amplified.
Yeah, correct. So, and if that good rapport basically isn't there, it can plummet the outcome. This, I can't remember which study it was now, but it can plummet the outcome, therapeutic outcome, by down to 5%. That's disastrous.
Wow,
That's
gosh, yeah.
we want. I'm going to, we want kind of heart and soul medicine, and we want, I'm passionate about that, human connection and cherishing each other, and I want, when I'm being treated by someone, or, I'm treating someone, I'm value that human being and that human's life, and I want to listen to them, and so yeah. But then to come back, you asked me about what the whole thing about herbal medicine. I mean, the history of medicine is absolutely fascinating, and it's really worth people going and exploring some of it, because any part of it, because we've always had very interesting ideas as human beings, and we've also had very weird and wacky ones. So there's always these weird tropes that whatever, it used to be quicksilver, that mercury was like the best go-to medicine, and there'll be tropes today that are said that XYZ, I wonder what it can be, is the best medicine ever, or it's the thing we've ever invented, and then 100 years plus pass, and the whole thing is pulled apart and seen that it wasn't really a very wise idea. So in terms of herbs, they are our oldest medicine. We can go back and look at archaeological grave goods. We can see that there's plants in there. Okay, we don't know exactly what those plants were used for, but they will be plants that we still recognize and use today medicinally, like nettle, say, for example, hollyhock, flax seeds. And then as soon as writing started to come along with human beings, a lot of the texts that were written were about health. We're back to this thing. We have a physical body. Things are going to go wrong with it. We've always been curious about how to help heal it. So I think it's the Eber's papyruses. You can read about garlic, for example, which we still use, in our food and medicinally to great use. Lots of other things, I've mentioned, nettle, licorice, hemp, on and on the list it goes. So it's a medicine that's intrinsic to our humanness. And I don't know whether the figures have changed, but globally it used to be about 85% of the world's population still rely on herbal medicine in some shape or form for their well-being. So that's really important.
That's
And I
interesting, isn't it? Because we often just think that, with all this modern world that we live in, we're in the West, and we forget about the more remote countries, or what some people might say, oh, they're backward because they don't have, an NHS and doctors and plastic pills and all of that, and yet they're thriving because they're still living off the land and have all that wisdom that we've, in our sophisticated, cultivated way, have gone, oh golly, we don't need to do that. I've got a man who will just pop me a pill and I'll be
Yeah.
fine.
Well, I think, not to sort of digress too much, but I think in Britain we've done a we are probably the worst European nation for losing touch with our herbs. Maybe,
Yes.
the size of our access to the land is different. Maybe it's because we industrialized first. There's all those things one can consider. But and I would also say I'm not, I don't reject modern medicine completely. That would be naive and silly.
Mm.
I think the over reliance on certain things is dangerous, and the naivety that it can do everything, is very, very questionable. So yes, and herbal medicine is, it's ridiculously safe overall, in a really nice way.
Yes, you don't. It doesn't come with a great long list of side effects. One of
No,
which, when you get down to the bottom, it says, "Oh, and including death."
yeah,
It's like, oh right, yeah, and that's just for like a paracetamol or something.
yeah, yeah. I mean, of course there are, you can poison yourself on anything, so this is where it comes back to me being saying it's really important to have these things embedded in the family. Let's rejoice. The ideal is to rejoice of the family unit, and that the parents have some wisdom that's been handed down to them, and that whole learning, that ancestral learning is
Mm.
such a gift, and I don't understand how we've ended up in a place of poo-pooing it. Well, I probably do understand it a bit, but that's a story for another day.
I
Um,
suppose we've compartmentalized our lives so much, haven't we? You
yeah,
go to school to learn. That's it. It's almost
yeah,
like for a lot of people, learning stops after they've come out of school, and you go to work, and then you come home. I mean, this is a sweeping statement,
yes,
and then
yeah.
medicine is over in this. You're ill. It's over here for you, and all of these things, the education and the work and the medicine or the health of us, is really one big circle, one all combined, isn't it? Because it is.
Yes, and is that, and yeah, and you saying that makes me think, there's levels of responsibility within that. And so it's back to this thing where in where we've got into this notion that, oh, I've got a cold. Like I'm just thinking my nephew, who was talking about one of his friends in his 20s who had a cold and dashed off to the doctor. And he said, well, what? He said, why did he do that? And I went, yeah, why did he do that? And it's something that you can so very easily treat yourself, but somewhere we've disempowered ourselves, haven't we?
Mm.
I'm generalizing, but it's just to paint a picture, really. So I think what we're seeing is, for all the gifts of the last few years, I think it's brought people's attention back for those who go, hang on, something's really not right here. What can I do? What can I engage with, around education, around my sovereignty, around my health? So that's where I would really encourage people to find out where your local herbalists are. I mean, yeah, I can do things on Zoom, but it's much better. Go on herbalists often will advertise herb walks. That's a really good way of starting to
Herb walks.
herb walks,
Yeah, so
just
you're walking and observing and
yeah,
being pointed out what
you
things
know,
are.
that's a dandelion. That's a
Yeah.
dandelion, because if it's something you don't know, you do need to know the difference between, hemlock versus, angelica, a really important distinction, because yes, you can do something really deadly with
Yes.
hemlock. So yeah, so familiarize yourself with the practitioners around you. Start to read about it. And I mean, a very simplistic thing again, is, like I said earlier, is I just get people to go out and see what they see, and it might be just one plant, that catches their eye, that is a herb. And I said, well, just start to observe it all year round in all its, how does it grow, how does it flower, what does it taste like, so go and read stuff about it, and get a relationship with it, because what we're needing, is a relationship with our natural world to be very clear and tangible, and we're needing that feedback loop and that relationship with ourselves to be reawakened.
Mm.
And, again, people have gone very much into their heads, and that handing over agency. It's like, let's bring it back in. And I would say overall, it's quite a dangerous thing to me say as a professional herbalist, is that if you teach people, enough about herbal medicine, they don't really need to see me. They can do so much of the basics themselves.
I don't think. I mean, like any profession, though, somebody, a cabinet maker, could show somebody how to make a cabinet. But at the end of the day, we're all a bit lazy, and we've all got busy lives. So, I don't think you'll be out of a job.
I don't think I'll be
The
out of job, but
you mentioned about the building a relationship with plants, and it just dawned on me: if more and more people had that, did a herb walk, or was just aware of certain plants and all the rest of it, I was thinking perhaps they'd be a little bit more concerned about how we tarmac over everything, or how they lay out their gardens with just grass, or fairly uniform and bland, because so many of these very important plants could be in our gardens, on the verges, in the edges of fields, and perhaps we wouldn't just sort of roll down and try and get rid of what we feel are weeds,
yeah,
you know, when actually those weeds could be the things that are going to keep us alive.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's pockets of where that, there's certain councils where they do wild verges, and was it the no mow May kind of things happen, and it's for the insects. But actually, we
Yeah,
benefit,
we could deal
we
with it too.
benefit too. So just so really simple things that people can do. Start to add herbs that they're I mean, okay, you can go to the supermarket and buy these, various the culinary herbs which have a crossover with medicinal herbs. But they can start to, if they've got access to the countryside and it's clean. What I'm just looking at to my garden now. The nettles coming up, the dandelions are coming up, the cleavers is coming up. So these are all things that we can actually add into our diet, just in small quantities. They're long, 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 long history of it being handed down orally and in folk medicine of being spring cleansers. So really vital.
Because you can make simple teas, can't you? I
In
mean,
teas, yeah,
infusions and things. I mean,
yeah,
I've got some mint in my garden, and every now and again I'll grab some mint and just put boiling water on it, and maybe a drop of lemon or something.
yeah. So
Squeeze a lemon in,
yeah,
and it's
it's
lovely. It's very
lovely. Yeah,
refreshing
yeah.
and different as well.
Yeah, and I better, seeing as you've probably got listeners in the Southern Hemisphere, I better put one in for them. A really good one, a winter one for people going through the winter seasons is sage. Just have a nice cup of sage tea if you've got a sage bush around you. Just one or two leaves, and that's there's these lovely sayings that if you drink that all between sort of March and September in the Northern Hemisphere, but turn it over
Turn it
if you're
around, yeah.
south. I'll let them work that one out. That you kind of live to 100 kind of thing, or you will get rid of all the aches and pains and just keep things at a base. So these are, I guess, this is about things we can do. There's levels, the things we can,
Mm.
the maintenance of good health, and just hoping to keep, well, not necessarily hoping, but doing our best to keep the immune system working and keeping things at bay, and then topping it up with more sort of medicinal strength stuff if we kind of succumb to something a bit more robust, in the panoply of illnesses that we can get over the winter months. So
And
yeah,
it's fun as well, isn't it? I mean, I'm somebody who likes paraphernalia of things, so I enjoy getting a bit of mint, or another thing I do is lemon and ginger. And
mm,
so I get a bit of root ginger and some lemon, and I squeeze the lemon out and chop up the thing, and I like that whole process. Maybe it's just me, but rather than just a packet of something and shove it in and you've got the mint on your hands, it smells absolutely divine. You've got the lemon sparkling up into your eye. It's going, oh, well, I can't see anything. I just find that fun, and then it's a delicious thing. And I can't help thinking that if people just do that on a very small scale, you've started the journey. You just
have
become
you
aware of it.
and you've started that initial bit, and then you're starting to take this stuff, and then this other beautiful thing happens is you get this feedback loop, because your body will start to go, tell you what it's getting from it. So that's the other thing of I the things that I repeat often, but
Mm.
we're the last sort of creation on the planet. So our bodies have been designed to understand how these herbs work. So they go in, we digest them really well, and our bodies go, yep, I know, that bit of dandelion I'm going to use, it's going to do some marvelous things for the kidney and liver, for example. And so our bodies aren't fighting the input from the plants. And then once we're feeling that benefit, we go, oh, whatever it is, my aches and pains gone, or my stomach aches gone. And I think you mentioned a bit earlier about the sugar,
Mm.
the sugary diet that we have, which is part of this process that of we're being very infantilized on all sorts of levels by all sorts of organizations, and sugar is one of those things. It keeps you dumbed down. It's doing a lot of inflammatory degradation to the body, whereas with the herbs, you've got these really complex flavors and tastes going on, and some of them are what we call marvelous bitter tastes. And I always get very excited when people initially go, because I've got all my, tinctures behind me here, and they go, "Oh my God, that tasted disgusting to begin with," and then a few weeks go by, and they go, "Actually, I quite like it now, Kym." And what's that taste? And I go, "Well, that's the bitter taste, and it's just waking up everything in your mouth, and that's going to give information down throughout the whole of your body for whatever particular thing we're working on. What the root is,
Mm.
the causes." So, yeah, it's a really important to get that relational thing going. And I think that then filters out, because it's the even one starts that journey, you're going to be enthusiastic, you're going to talk to someone else, you're going to pass it on to family members, and it also then adds into us being connected to each other, which, so there's such a contrast. I think I read recently, it's something like the average UK person is on about 50, not 50, when around 55, they're on about 5 drugs. I mean, that's mind-blowing. That's mind
Blimey. Yeah, that is mind blowing.
um
It's an interesting time, just to sort of round up now, but it's an interesting time. I think we're in a pivotal moment in history. We've had a huge medical scare across the world, and everybody's found that there's been a response to that that's not been ideal for a lot of people. Let's just say that, and I think people are questioning a lot of stuff at the moment of where we are, and things are being offered to us by powers that be. And I do think that we're in a pivotal moment in which a lot of people are looking for, or perhaps looking back to other older things, or looking
yeah.
away from these remedies that have been offered to us in plastic blister packs and things like that, and are looking. Do you feel that? Do you feel that more people are becoming a
Well,
bit more aware?
I would say it's a curious journey, because when I started out as a herbalist last century, 20 years ago, I like saying that. Um, people were very aware then. I suppose it was sort of coming out of the kind of 60s, 70s whole foodie thing. And so people were very engaged. And then something changed. And I'm getting clearer and clearer of how that something changed. There was a big agenda going on, which we don't need to go into today. And a lot of anxiety built up, and this even more, as I say, disembodiment of handing over. And I think, but now, because of the blessing of what's happened, of being exposed in the last 3 years, okay, there's a huge level of distrust for many, but it's brought in a lot of critical questioning and thinking, which I think is absolutely necessary
Mm.
and healthy. And one shouldn't going back to that thing, you shouldn't just naively take things. Do ask questions. So yeah, people are turning back again to the more natural medicines, and the more hands-on therapeutics, and quite right too, because they've been badly let down. Because
Mm.
a really important aspect of that letting down was medical consent. Medical
Mm.
consent has just got disregarded, and it's a very sad thing that that's happened. But those people who are prepared to go, well, my health is in my own hands. Our health is in our own hands. We don't have to go along with what we're told to do. I always say to people, it doesn't matter who they're going to see, is, gather your information, ask questions, whether that's of me, or their
Mm.
consultant, and then just, tune in to yourself. And see what is right for you, because I think this is the other thing that's maybe in danger. And actually, I just think remembering a story one of my old herbal colleagues did. He was doing some training, he was doing a training course for some doctors, and it got to the point when he said, of course, your patients, it's up to them whether something's done to them or not, or whether they take something or not. And they got, they were quite young doctors, and they got all huffy and went, no, no, that's not right. And it ended up like some highbrow person in the hospital bureaucracy had to be rung up to check this point of, that he'd said, and they went, no, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Whatever's done to someone, it's their, it's this they
It's
have
their body after all, isn't it?
body. They have sovereignty over their body, and it's up to them. So,
The,
so that means you can agree, and it means you can refuse
and
things.
and one of the things I suppose is that when you go to a doctor and the doctor says this is what I think it is, and he's using all his experience and expertise, and you hope that he's right. But you don't go for a second opinion, do you? You just go, oh, right, thanks very much.
Some do.
Because
Some
you're,
do.
some do, but most people don't, because probably you can't get onto another doctor's surgery
Well,
by the complicated rules of being where you live and things like that.
we're into the machinations now, aren't we? Of Zoom stuff, and people not even get hold of seeing a real doctor, which and I think,
Well, yes, I guess
um,
that's a complicated rabbit hole, isn't it? But I
yeah.
mean, just in the old days, you would just trust this one person, and you assume that they were correct. They'd give you the pills, and away you go.
Well,
But what you were just saying there about having reminding yourself that you don't have to take these things if you really don't feel it's right. The doctor may say it's okay, but you may have. I have this really weird feeling that I shouldn't be taking it.
well,
Just
yeah, I mean, you're coming from that beautifully
naive point of view.
well, maybe because I've worked with a lot of people who terrible things have happened to them, and often they'll say, "I wish I'd listened to my gut instinct and never done X, Y, Z."
Right.
And I'm not, bad things happen and good things happen, but we've ended up in a bit of a mess with the sacred cow that's the
Hmm.
NHS, and until we actually like the conversations we're just starting to flesh out in this conversation now of understanding what health is, understanding what the life cycle is, we're not going to be able to get to grips with making our healthcare better in this country. It's just going to stay in that very mechanistic and bureaucratic, well,
Hmm.
sludge, sludge.
Unless we start thinking about it
Yeah.
ourselves,
Yes,
which is
yes.
very much the message that you've been saying, that it starts with us.
It absolutely starts with us, and within that, I mean, you're saying, like, speaking to a doctor. I mean, the old school doctors who, I've got all the time in the world for, and they're a dying breed. And I think there was a retired GP I was listening to lately, and sorry, I can't remember his name, but he had done this huge study about family doctors, and that if you see the same doctor throughout the course of your treatment, or even the course of your lifespan in that surgery, the outcomes are so much better.
Mm.
And I don't know about you, but that's what I grew up with. The family doctor, it was actually the doctor who was there when I was born, and then until I moved away from the area, and it was the same doctor. So that, okay, things can go wrong in those relationships, but also a lot can go right. They have a relationship not only with you, but they know about your mother or your grandchildren.
Exactly, yeah. But a family history.
There's a feedback loop, which is
Mm.
really important. And I guess, so I think we're probably talking to the people, the audience that this goes out to. Hopefully, they're the kind of people who go, yeah, actually, relationships are important, and connection is important. And going, so that reiterates again, like when I'm working with people, I'm really humbled when, I do end up seeing quite a lot of the different generations in the family, or someone doesn't see me. And I had someone the other day who hadn't seen me for 20 years, and they popped up again, and you just think, well, that is such a testament
Mm.
to, their trust in me. And I think that's what I want to see, sort of a bit of humility to come back into medicine, along with some really robust ethics. I mean, okay, we know what's happening to the doctors who speak up, but I'm very pleased that they are speaking up and that they need
Must,
to.
but also for the doctors themselves, if they're seeing the same patient, it must be incredibly rewarding for them as well, rather than just seeing people who are basically there for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and then they've gone, and you never see them again, effectively, because you're
Yeah,
just continually trying to find out what this one effect is, and you
yeah.
want to hit it. I mean, it can't be as a rewarding a job as it was for those doctors who would go, yeah, oh, I remember you when you were 5. Look at you now.
Yeah.
There's got to be something
I
in
would
that
hope so.
relationship between
Well,
patient and doctor.
and I know you kind of wanted to wrap up, but I mean, there is a big conversation that this society needs to have, that we've ended up with the focus on doctors. I mean, like my daughter was just saying, she's just turning 18, and a lot of her peer group who want to become doctors, then that she said the drive for them to do it is not because they're interested in people or in, healing. They're interested in the status and the money.
Right.
And oh, well, that's not, you're always going to get some people who go into it for that, but you don't want that overall. um and I think this whole thing, this sort of thing, the whole doctor stuff going online, it's dangerous. And I've heard through another friend who's got a lot of GP friends that the GPs are feeling dissatisfied with that and not knowing what to do. And I think the sad thing is, we'll end up losing those doctors out of GP hospital medicine, and we'll just be left with, sort of the very rigid bureaucratic tendencies, and that will be very sad and very dangerous.
Which is another reason why looking to alternative medicines and keeping our health just in the general best way that we can is obviously going to be an advantage for most people anyway.
Yes,
And
and I would say to people to go, just talk, if you're in, if you haven't ever gone and seen one, and I can think the mindset can feel a bit daunting to people in Britain because we're not used to paying for things. But I would say, nothing is free. Nothing is free. We may think the NHS is free, but I think just to see your GP, well, when you could see the GP, I think it worked out like £148 for 5 minutes. That's what we're paying, as tax.
blimey, yeah,
It's a lot of money. So if you've got some agency to go and see what, I'm not saying herbalism is the be all and end all. You've got osteopaths, you've got acupuncturists, you've got, massage therapists. They've all got their place to play, because health is a multi-dimensional thing. And at some point, you might need something very specific, which might be the herbs. At another time, you might need something that's more mechanical and hands-on, So, ask, if you haven't explored this arena before, go and speak to your friends and family, see who they've seen. Because I think, personal recommendations are really, the tops really, and keeping it in your local area.
absolutely. And I presume if somebody comes to you and you go, do you know what, you're better talking to an acupuncturist, that's the advice you're not there going, oh, I'll give you some tinctures and give me the money and there we are, because those people hopefully will come back to you when it's right for
Yeah,
them.
well, that's how I operate. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I may be a bit of well, I've practiced a long time now, so I'm a bit of a strange creature.
Kym, it's been delightful to talk to you. Thank you for sparing some time. And hopefully this has been an interesting conversation for people who perhaps have never experienced this sort of thing and have thought, actually, my trust in doctors and medicine is waning because of certain circumstances recently, and that actually they are looking around for different approaches. And I think we've offered a different way for people to think about health, and that can't be bad.
Hope
So
so.
there we go. Thank you so much, Kym. I will leave your information in the description so people can get in touch if they would like to. But of course, the other herbalists and other alternative medicine practitioners are available. And if you've got a phone book, you can. I don't think people have phone books these days.
No, no.
No such thing. But online, of course. Thank you so much, Kym. Really appreciated that conversation. And thank you very much.
Yeah.
I will be back with more interviews in the coming days, so do stay tuned. Until the next time, from Kym and I, goodbye.
Hey.